welcome to Love and Life's Journey DIY. I'm Chantel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today's video just has two projects in it because they are a little bit more involved. However, they are well worth the time and effort. So let's jump in and get started. I'm going to be using this sign from Dollar Tree for the base of my lantern, and I'm going to start by removing all of the labels, the hanger, and the stake so that all I have left is the round part. And then I'm going to paint that on both sides using some brown chalk paint. This is a Waverly brand in the color Truffle, so it's just a dark brown. And I'm not painting the edges of this because it is going to be covered up and not show anyway. And since the one side of the round sign was a little bit slick, I am going to give it a coat of clear matte sealer just to help that paint stay on better. Then I'm going to paint 8 of these 12-inch dowels from Dollar Tree, and I'm using the same color of brown paint, and I'm going to give them all a good coat, and then I'm going to wipe off the excess paint. This will give it a little bit more of a worn or even stained look instead of just being a solid paint color. I'm going to use the round piece of this little picture frame that I picked up in the Crafter's Square aisle at Dollar Tree for the top of my lantern, and I'm going to remove it from the base, and then I will remove the center and the little metal prongs that hold the picture in as well. So basically all I'm left with is a wooden donut. And then I'm going to paint it with the same brown paint and wipe off the excess. Next, I'm going to use some of this iron-on wood veneer edging that I picked up on Amazon. You can also find it at Home Depot or Lowe's, and I will put a link to it in the description box, but I am going to use this and I'm going to cut a piece that is just a little bit bigger than my circle, and I'm leaving about an inch of overlap on this, and then I will actually cut 2 pieces the same size. And I love these miter shears for cutting this material. It just works so well. Definitely one of my favorite crafting tools. I'm also cutting 2 smaller pieces to go on top of that smaller circle to add to the top of my lantern. I'm using this old glass cutting board to protect my surface, just something that is heat resistant. You can use an ironing board, but I'm just using this, and I'm going to put the 2 adhesive sides together on my strips of veneer and then just iron them with a hot iron. It just takes a few seconds to adhere those together. And the nice thing is when these are still warm, you can shape them. So I'm going to go ahead and just bend them into the circles, and then I'm going to use a little clip from Dollar Tree in the Crafter's Square and clip it together while it cools, and this will help it hold its shape. I decided to trim off a little bit of the ends on this, and then I'm just kind of measuring how big I want the circle, and then I'm going to secure it together with a little bit of hot glue. And again, I'll just clamp that while that hot glue sets up. I'm going to do the same thing with the 2 longer pieces, and I'm going to iron those together and then wrap them around my base, the circle that I painted, and clamp that together to kind of hold that shape until it cools. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be close just so that it will hold the shape. And once that has cooled, I am going to paint it and the smaller circle as well, and I am going to wipe off the excess paint on these 2. Then once the paint is dry, I'm going to glue the veneer edging along the edge of that circle, and I'm just making sure that it is flush on the bottom so that my lantern is going to sit level. To help mark out where my dowels are going to go, I'm going to trace around my small circle on a piece of paper and cut that out. Then I'm going to fold that in half, and I'm just using that as kind of a guideline to make marks across from each other on the edge of the circle. And I'm going to mark it out in 8 sections so that I have 8 points where I'm going to be gluing my dowels. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the large circle. I cut a piece of paper to fit inside, and then I am going to mark out 8 points on this as well. Then I'm going to use my hot glue gun, and I'm going to do the dowels that are opposite each other, just doing 2 at a time. To try and get these even and have time to work with them. I'm gluing them a little bit at an angle, and then I'm going to glue them to the top ring of the lantern. And then I'm going to continue adding the dowels until I have all 8 in place. Next, I'm going to glue the small ring to the top of the lantern, and so I'm using a little bit of hot glue very sparingly around the edge of that ring, and then I'll just glue it right onto the top, centered on that donut-shaped piece. Now I'm going to add my twine to this, and hopefully I can explain this well, but first I'm going to start off by just putting 4 pieces of twine wrapped around the lantern and tied off, just equally spaced all the way up the lantern. Once I have those on and tied off, I am going to secure them with a little bit of hot glue so that they don't slide up or down the lantern. And I will just secure them in several different places all the way around the lantern. And then I'm going to trim off the extra ends where I tied the knots. Okay, this is the part where it gets a little bit tricky, and hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So I first am going to take a long piece of twine. You have to take it off of the spool because you won't be able to thread it through everywhere you need. So I just wound some around my hand, and then I am taking one end and hot gluing it at the bottom on one of the dowels at the outside, kind of between that outer rim and the dowel. And then I am going to take the twine and I'm going to wrap it up to the next dowel, and I'm going to go inside the lantern and around the dowel and wrap it around and then come back down to the next dowel. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going up to that next twine row behind the dowel and then back down, and I'm going to secure that with a little bit of hot glue at the bottom of the lantern, and I'm going to zigzag all the way around that bottom row just like I did here. When I have the bottom row finished, I'm going to start the next row up, and I am going to do the same thing, and I am making it so the twine kind of makes a diamond pattern, and you'll kind of see it take shape. But here I'm going behind the dowel, and then I'm going back down to meet the other, and I'm going to wrap it from like the bottom around. And it'll make sense when you're doing it because you kind of have to wrap it around the dowel or the twine to get it to hold itself in place. And so I just continue this all the way around the lantern and all the way up. And then I do use some hot glue at the top of the lantern to secure it at the top of those dowels where it meets the top ring. So after Christmas last year, I bought this unfinished wood bead garland on clearance, so I'm going to be using beads from it. You can get wooden beads at craft stores or on Amazon, and I will put a link in the description box below for those. But I figured out how long I wanted to make my little handle, and I'm going to use that many beads. And then a great way to paint or stain these is to add your paint or stain to a little Ziploc baggie. And since I'm using paint, I added some water to it. And then I'm just going to put my beads inside the bag, zip it up, and then I'm just going to roll them all around so they're good and covered. And then I'm going to take them out, put them on some paper towel, and wipe off all of the excess paint, and then just let them dry. This is so much easier than trying to paint them one at a time, and definitely much cleaner. I did wipe off the excess paint as much as I could so these looked more worn or stained, and then I am just threading them on that same twine that I used to wrap around the lantern. And then I will tie off the ends with some bigger knots and secure them with hot glue, and then I'm going to glue them onto that top rim of the lantern. I'm just going to add this skinnier LED candle that I got from Hobby Lobby and some greenery that I believe I picked up at Walmart, and I love how this turned out. This is definitely one of my top 5 favorite DIYs that I have ever done. I love how this turned out. And it looks so high-end. It looks like it was really complicated, but honestly, it was not that hard, and I did it in one evening. So I am loving this. I think it would be great to use for a nautical theme decor as well, but I just love how it turned out. For the second project, I'm going to be making a little chest or storage organizer for on top of a table or a dresser, and I'm going to start by using 2 of these long signs from Dollar Tree. I'm going to remove all of the 3-dimensional elements off of them so I just have the flat signs. I'm also going to be using 3 of these little bins from Dollar Tree with the little metal detail on the front. I'm going to cut down my signs so that they are the same width as the depth of these little bins. And I'm using a cutting mat and a razor knife, and I'm just going to score this several times carefully and then I'll be able to bend it and snap it and cut it off. Then I'll just take a little sandpaper and smooth out that edge. And I'm going to do this on both signs. To get the right length, I'm going to lay out my 3 bins on top of the sign, and I'm going to mark out that length, and then I'm going to add another inch to that, and that's where I will be cutting off my sign. And again, I will be doing this with both signs so that they are the exact same size. Next, I'm going to measure the height of these little bins, and I'm going to add 1/8 of an inch to that measurement. And then I am going to cut some pieces out of the scraps from my signs so that I have 4 pieces that are 1/8 of an inch taller than these little bins and the same length as the signs and the bins themselves. These are going to be the spacers that go in between these little drawers and on the ends of them as well. And as you can see here, I'm sanding all of the rough edges away. Now I'm going to glue my little spacers onto the signs, and I am going to use the back of the sign, so the nice smooth brown edge of the sign, and I am going to glue one of these little spacers on each end, and then I am going to figure out where they need to go in between the little bins. And you just want to be sure that your little drawer slides in and out easily. And I am just using hot glue, but I am using the Gorilla hot glue sticks, so they do hold better than just regular glue sticks. Next, I'm going to paint this and the other sign in this chalk paint by Rust-Oleum. It's a chiffon cream color that I picked up at Walmart. For this little chest, I'm also going to be using 5 of these little boxes from the Crafter's Square aisle at Dollar Tree. I'm going to sand them all down, and then I am going to cut a little piece of cardboard that's going to get glued inside the little inside part of the box where that flower cutout is, so that it is solid and you don't have a cutout anymore. I'm going to do this for all 5 boxes, and then I'm going to actually turn these around inside the outside boxes so that the part with the cutout faces the back. Then I'm going to use some wood glue and glue all 5 boxes together side by side in a row so that the drawers all are facing forward. And then I am going to use a clamp and clamp them together. I did put a piece of cardboard on each end to kind of protect that from the metal of the clamp, but I clamped it together and let them dry. So while my wood glue is drying, I'm going to take this piece and turn it upside down. I'm going to glue a wooden knob in each corner. I got these at Hobby Lobby. They were just left over from another project that I had, but I'm going to add them to the bottom as feet for my little chest. And then I'm going to paint the bottom and the little knobs. After about an hour, I went back and painted those 5 boxes that I glued together. I painted them all on the outside, except for the bottom, and then I painted the little drawers as well. I also removed the hardware from the 3 little bins, and I painted the fronts of those. Once all the pieces are painted and completely dry, then I'm going to dry brush them using some Waverly Antique Wax. And I always start out really light and then I end up adding more and more until I have it as distressed looking as I want it to be. Then I added the hardware back onto my 3 little bins. Next I'm going to take a wooden dowel and I am going to cut 5 1-inch pieces. I'm just using these miter shears. They work pretty good for this. And then I'm going to sand off the edges that I cut so they're nice and smooth. And then I'm going to glue them to the centers of those little drawers so they're like little drawer pulls. And I didn't show it, but I did paint them as well. And before I assemble these pieces, I am going to spray them all with this clear matte sealer. Now that the sealer is dry, it's time to finish assembling the cabinet. So I'm going to glue this sign on top of the base that we glued the feet or the knobs to. And I'm going to use some E6000 to glue this on. And you want to do this as neatly as possible because any drips could cause your little drawers not to slide in and out nicely. And after I glued this top on, I actually did put my drawers in and make sure that they fit and they were going to be able to be pulled in and out. And then I did remove them while the glue was drying so that they didn't get glued inside accidentally. And I also added a very heavy dictionary to help hold it all together while the glue dried. Anyone remember when we actually looked up words in the dictionary instead of just Googling them? Now that the base piece is dry, I'm going to add that row of 5 drawers that I made onto the top, and I am going to use some E6000 just to glue this on so it will be nice and secure. And I didn't realize that my camera wasn't recording, but I did get part of this part where I actually took some old keys and I used E6000 and just a little bit of hot glue and glued those keys to those little drawer pulls. I just thought this made it look a lot more interesting and added kind of a vintage touch to it. But you could add anything onto these as little knobs, or you could just leave them plain. I hope you enjoyed these projects that were a little bit more detailed, but I think well worth the time and effort. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps my channel. And let me know in the comments if you like the more detailed DIYs or if you enjoy quicker, simpler projects. I'd like to know. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a blessed day.